I'm at NAREIT headquarters in Washington, and joining me today is Doug Bibby, President of the National Multi-Housing Council. Thanks for joining us today, Doug.
My pleasure, thank you.
Your organization just held its annual meeting last week. What would you say are some of the themes or issues that came out of that meeting?
Well, I think people are seeing rental housing through a different prism right now, and so the themes that we heard at the annual meeting were that there's a great optimism in our industry right now. We're poised for a strong year in 2012, and there are a couple of factors in that. Number one, we're seeing surging demand for rental housing and a preference for apartments, and so that is providing great growth opportunities for the members. At the same time, the supply is more limited in the industry and in our economy. And that really relates to the fact that during the single-family housing bubble of the last decade, our members were much more restrained in their building. And then for the last 3 years, we've had a serious underdevelopment in the business. So you have that going on. That's really provided for some solid rent growth over the past couple of years, and we'll see continued rent growth in 2012. The other themes coming out were the availability of capital. We're seeing it's available in all markets at all times, but the pricing has retrenched a bit in terms of the terms and conditions. And then finally, the consumer is definitely king and has a great number of technology preferences at their disposal.
Let me ask you, with the multifamily sector being one of the few bright spots in the economy right now, what do you think it would take to sustain that momentum?
Well, it's going to first take jobs and growth in the economy, and we depend so much on job growth. So that's the number one. It's probably number 1A too. Number two, we're going to need a healthy single-family sector. Multifamily housing always operates better, performs better when there's a healthy single-family sector. And then finally, liquidity and credit are important to us, very important to us. And so the availability of liquidity and the competitively priced credit are the third key factor for us.
How do you think that the apartment industry responded to President Obama's State of the Union speech the other night? And was there anything in the speech that you would have liked to hear that maybe you didn't hear?
Well, the President very rightfully focused on single-family housing and the fact that there are millions of homeowners that are underwater on their mortgages. So he was really concentrating his remarks on addressing that problem. What we see in front of us in multifamily housing, however, are three things that were not mentioned to any degree in the State of the Union address. Number one, we see the need for housing finance reform, and we want to know what's going to happen with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we want to know what's going to happen with private capital coming into our marketplace. So that is the number one consideration we're facing. Second is we face humongous deficit and debt problems in this country, and so tax reform is going to be on the table, and we want to make very sure, as I know all the members of NAREIT are as well, that anything to do with tax reform does not disadvantage multifamily housing, as the 1986 Tax Act did. And then finally, the Dodd-Frank legislation has hundreds of rulemakings to come. And there are some important ramifications for multifamily housing from those rulemakings, and so we'll be watching that very, very carefully.
How does the industry plan to meet the growing demand for renters?
Well, we're going to have to be very innovative. Given what I mentioned earlier about supply deficit, we're going to see a lot of innovation and customization. We're already seeing units getting smaller, particularly in downtown areas, as developers try to push for more density in the developments and the redevelopments that they're working on. So I think we'll see more customization and trying to provide more choices for consumers going forward, because they're going to be demanding more choices from us.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Carissa Chappelle for REIT.com.